The echo from the past. It had been 40,000 years since Earth was destroyed, wiped out in a brutal war that left the once thriving planet a barren, lifeless rock. No one alive today had ever seen it, and no one could truly remember the horrors that led to its fall. To most, Earth was a forgotten story, a myth, something that only the oldest and most ancient races spoke of. But that was about to change. Across the galaxy, civilizations had grown, prospered, and spread their influence far and wide. The Galactic Council, an alliance of the most powerful species, had long since assumed their dominance. They thought themselves untouchable, far removed from the concerns of the past. They didn't believe in old legends, especially not the one that spoke of humanity, a race that had once inhabited Earth and caused fear among the stars. For thousands of years, Earth's destruction was only whispered about, treated as little more than a historical footnote. But recently, strange things had been happening. Disturbances in deep space, unexplained signals, mysterious energy readings. The Galactic Council had ignored them at first, chalking them up to natural anomalies or remnants of ancient star systems. But then came the signal. It started quietly, a low hum, something easily overlooked by most. Yet, as time passed, it grew louder, sharper, and more distinct. The first few to hear it thought it was a mistake, a malfunction in the galaxy's communication systems. They couldn't have been more wrong. The signal was not random, and it was not a glitch. One of the first to decode the message was a young, curious scientist named Zara. She was a member of the Zektar species, known for their intellectual curiosity and their ability to decipher complex information. Zara's lab was filled with various types of communication devices and scanning equipment, each designed to monitor the galaxy's frequencies. She had been working late into the night when the signal hit her screens. At first, she thought it was a joke. The message was clear, but the words were almost impossible to believe. It wasn't written in any language that had ever been used in the galaxy, yet somehow, Zara's systems translated it. The message was simple, yet chilling. Run. There was no context, no explanation, just those two words. Run. Zara's heart skipped a beat. She stared at the screen, unsure of what to make of it. She had seen countless signals in her years of service, but nothing like this. She quickly transmitted the message to the Galactic Council's communication system, hoping to get answers. The Council's response was swift, but dismissive. "It's a prank, Zara," came the reply from an elder representative. Nothing to worry about. But Zara wasn't convinced. She knew that the galaxy was filled with ancient secrets, some of which were far older than even the Council itself. What if this was something more? Something significant? Her instincts told her that this was not just a random signal. There was something far deeper behind it. It was as though the message was meant to be heard by someone. And that someone, she realized, was her. Days passed, and the signal continued to grow in intensity. It began to repeat itself over and over again, until it became impossible to ignore. "Run," it said again. And again. Each time it echoed across the stars. Zara could feel a growing sense of unease in the pit of her stomach. It was almost as though the message was a warning, but from whom? And why? Then the Council finally acknowledged the signal's existence. They had been forced to listen when it reached a frequency they could no longer disregard. The Council had always believed that Earth was lost forever, that humanity was nothing more than a footnote in the galaxy's history. But now, the message seemed to suggest otherwise. "Where is it coming from?" one of the high-ranking officials asked, his voice thick with skepticism. Zara's screens flickered as she analyzed the data. The signal was coming from a region of space that had been untouched for eons, an area known as the Dark Zone, a place where no one dared to venture. It was an ancient sector of the galaxy, once home to powerful civilizations that had long since vanished. Many believed the area to be cursed, a place where strange things happened, but no one really knew why. The Council sent an exploration team to investigate, But when they arrived, they found nothing but emptiness. The signal had stopped. There was no trace of its origin, no sign of life. It was as if the message had come from nowhere and disappeared just as quickly. Zara couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. The council had dismissed the warning, but she couldn't forget the sense of dread that had gripped her when she first heard it. The message was not just a call for help. It was a threat, a promise that something ancient and powerful was about to awaken. And when it did, the galaxy would never be the same again. As the days turned into weeks, Zara continued to search for answers. She could not let it go. The more she dug, the more questions arose. Who had sent the message? Why was it directed at the entire galaxy? And most importantly, what had happened to Earth? Her mind raced with possibilities, and she couldn't shake the idea that this was all connected. There was a hidden truth buried in the past, and it was beginning to resurface. The Council may have forgotten about Earth, but humanity's legacy was far from over. Zara knew that the universe would soon learn just how wrong it was to ignore the past. One night, as she sat alone in her lab, the signal returned. This time, it was louder, clearer, and more urgent than ever before. Run, it repeated, but now there was a new word at the end. Now. Zara's breath caught in her throat. She realized with a shock that the message was not for the Council, not for the galaxy at large. It was for humanity. Earth's long-forgotten descendants were trying to warn the galaxy of something far worse than anyone could imagine. The message was not a plea. It was a command. Run. Now. Zara couldn't shake the eerie feeling that gripped her chest as the message reverberated through her lab, echoing in her mind long after the words faded. Run. Now. There was an urgency in those words, something ancient and untold, and it was not just a warning. It was a command. The Galactic Council had brushed off the signal, assuming it was a random anomaly. They had sent their exploration team to the Dark Zone, only to return with no new information. But Zara knew something was wrong. She had spent her entire life studying the galaxy's history, and one thing was certain: Earth's story was far from over. This message, this warning, was a sign that something more was coming. Zara sat at her terminal, her fingers hovering over the keys, wondering if she was losing her mind. Her own people, the Zektar, had no interest in Earth's ancient history. To them, it was just a myth, a distant memory. But Zara couldn't shake the feeling that this was real, too real to ignore. As she sifted through her records, trying to make sense of the signal, a strange new data set appeared on her screen. It was a set of coordinates, buried deep within the data that had been transmitted with the message. The coordinates pointed to a location in deep space, somewhere near the remains of a long-forgotten star system, well beyond any known routes. The coordinates seemed to match an area that had once been called the Cradle of Humanity, but no one had dared visit it in millennia. She couldn't ignore the pull. It was as if her instincts were guiding her toward the truth, and the more she looked, the more she realized that the answer to the mystery of Earth's fall might lie hidden in those forgotten ruins. With trembling hands, Zara sent a message to the Galactic Council, requesting an emergency mission to investigate the coordinates. But she knew that she couldn't wait for their approval. If the Council was unwilling to take action, she would go alone. Late that night, Zara secretly gathered her gear and left her home station. She boarded a small scout ship, one that she had worked on personally, and set the course for the coordinates. The ship's engines hummed to life, and she felt a mix of excitement and fear. If the Council would not act, then she would take matters into her own hands. She had no idea what awaited her out there, but the urgency of the signal left no room for hesitation. The journey was long, and Zara spent her time reviewing the data she had gathered. She scrolled through countless ancient texts about Earth, searching for any clue that could shed light on what had happened. Every story she read seemed to suggest that humanity had been more powerful than anyone realized. They were a race capable of shaping the galaxy, but they had vanished so quickly that no one truly understood why. The more she read, the more she began to uncover disturbing details about humanity's last days. According to ancient records, a great war had raged between humanity and the other galactic powers, a war that humanity had ultimately lost. But the final battle was shrouded in mystery. No one knew exactly how Earth had been destroyed, only that the planet had been wiped out in a violent cataclysm. But if humanity had been defeated so utterly, then why was the galaxy being warned now? 40,000 years later, what could possibly remain of them? As she neared the coordinates, Zara began to feel a strange sensation in the air, as though the very fabric of space was trembling. The ship's instruments began to malfunction, flickering on and off as they passed through an invisible barrier. It felt like she was passing through an ancient veil, and she could not help but wonder if this was a sign that something powerful and old was awakening. Suddenly, the ship's view screen displayed a cluster of derelict ships, massive, ancient vessels, floating lifelessly in the void. They were unlike anything Zara had ever seen. These ships were built for war, their designs brutal and formidable. They had clearly seen better days, their hulls scarred from countless battles. Some were barely holding together, their once proud structures now rusted and broken. Zara's breath caught in her throat. These ships were from Earth. She had no doubt about it. She brought her ship in closer to investigate, navigating carefully through the wreckage. It was clear that these ships had been abandoned long ago, but they still held a terrible presence. It was as if they were waiting for something, or someone, to come and awaken them. Zara's hands shook as she initiated the scanning systems, hoping to find some clue as to who had left these ships here. The scans revealed traces of ancient human technology, far more advanced than anything in the galaxy today. These ships were not just relics. They were weapons designed for a purpose far beyond the scope of the galaxy's current understanding. But it wasn't just the ships that caught her attention. As her scanners scanned deeper into the debris field, a new signal appeared, another message, faint but growing stronger. It was the same signal she had received back on her home station. Run, now. It was coming from one of the largest ships in the cluster, a ship that looked remarkably well preserved compared to the others. Zara felt a chill run down her spine. Whatever had been left behind here was not just a remnant of humanity's past. It was a warning, a signal from a time long gone, a message from the survivors of Earth, if there were any survivors left. The signal seemed to come from deep within the ship. Zara knew that she had to board it, no matter the risk. She had to know what happened to humanity, and why the galaxy was being warned. Her ship locked onto the massive vessel, and she prepared to board. As she stepped into the airlock, her heart raced. She didn't know what she would find inside, but she knew one thing for sure. This was no ordinary exploration. This was a mission that could change the course of history. Zara took a deep breath, knowing that her actions could have profound consequences. The truth she was about to uncover could either save the galaxy or doom it. As the airlock hissed open, Zara stepped into the darkness of the abandoned ship. The faint echo of the signal filled her ears. Run, now. The ship's interior was silent, eerily still. Zara's footsteps echoed through the long, dimly lit corridors, the only sound in the oppressive quiet. The air was thick, musty with the smell of age and decay, as though the ship had not seen life in centuries. The walls were lined with ancient technology, its surface worn and cracked, yet still giving off a faint, pulsating glow. Zara couldn't help but feel a shiver crawl up her spine. Something about this place felt alive, as if it were waiting. The faint signal, run, now, was still coming from deep within the ship, a haunting reminder that whatever lay ahead was far from ordinary. Zara had always known that the destruction of Earth had been shrouded in mystery, but the discoveries she was making now were opening doors to questions that hadn't even occurred to her. How had humanity created such immense power, and why had it been hidden away for so long? She continued down the corridor, passing what appeared to be an old control room. The door was slightly ajar, and as she pushed it open, the dim lights flickered to life, revealing a large command center. Once, this room had been filled with the hum of activity, but now it was nothing more than a monument to the past. A few consoles remained intact, their screens dark, but there was still a haunting familiarity to the room. She could almost picture humans in uniforms, working in coordinated haste, their eyes fixed on the screens, waiting for the next command. Zara approached one of the consoles, her fingers brushing over the dusty panel. She hesitated for a moment before pressing a button. The screen flickered to life, displaying a series of ancient, cryptic symbols. It was a language Zara recognized, an ancient dialect of human origin, one she had studied for years. The symbols flashed, and slowly they began to translate into words. Warning, the last of Earth's fleet has awakened. Prepare for rebirth. The galaxy will bow before the power of humanity. Zara's breath caught in her throat. These words sent a rush of adrenaline through her veins. Rebirth. The fleet had been destroyed 40,000 years ago, and yet the message implied something else entirely. The fleet wasn't just a weapon. It was a symbol of humanity's legacy, something more profound, more dangerous than she had ever imagined. She quickly searched the rest of the console, hoping for more information. It didn't take long before she found a file labeled Project Genesis. Her heart raced as she opened it, and a wealth of new data flooded the screen. According to the documents, Project Genesis had been a top-secret initiative during humanity's final years. The purpose of the project was to create a fleet capable of wiping out entire star systems, designed to be unstoppable, a weapon that could defend humanity from all threats. But there was more. The project had been developed under the highest security measures, and it was not just about destruction. It had been a final attempt to secure humanity's future, a safeguard against the galaxy's other races. The fleet was not merely a symbol of vengeance. It was meant to be the last hope for humanity's survival. And the terrifying part was that it was still operational. Zara's mind raced. This was not just a warning about humanity's power. It was a promise that, no matter what, Earth would rise again. She wasn't just dealing with old warships. She was standing in front of the core of an ancient, sleeping force that could turn the tide of the galaxy. She had to know more. She couldn't leave now. She had come too far. Zara navigated further into the ship, deeper into the labyrinth of its corridors. The farther she went, the more the sensation of being watched grew. Her instincts screamed at her to turn back, but the pull of discovery was too strong. She had to learn everything. She had to understand the true purpose of the fleet. As she entered another large chamber, she saw it, the heart of the ship. It was a massive chamber, and at its center was something that took her breath away. A colossal spherical machine, unlike anything Zara had ever seen. It was surrounded by intricate patterns, energy fields shimmering around its surface. The machine was still, but there was an undeniable hum that came from deep within its core, as if it were waiting for something. This, she realized, was the key. This was what had been left behind. The core of humanity's last hope. The machine, hidden in the depths of the ship, was not just a weapon. It was a powerful artifact designed to channel immense energy, to awaken the fleet and activate its power. It had been dormant for millennia, but now it was active again. Zara couldn't help but feel a deep sense of awe. Humanity had built this, and no one in the galaxy had even known it existed. This was the power they had hidden, the power that had been lost to time. But why? Why had they built such a force? And why had it been left to slumber for so long? The answer was beginning to take shape in her mind, but it was still incomplete. She needed more information, and the machine seemed to be the key to unlocking it. But as she stepped closer, a sudden, sharp alarm blared throughout the ship. Red lights flashed, and the signal, "Run, no," grew louder, more urgent. Something was wrong. Zara froze, her eyes scanning the room. She had awoken something, and whatever it wasn't happy to be disturbed. The machine's hum intensified, and the floor beneath her began to tremble. She felt the heat rise in the air as a strange energy filled the chamber. The machine was reacting to her presence. She had no idea what was happening, but one thing was certain. She had triggered something that she shouldn't have. Before she could react, the ship's systems came to life. Massive steel doors began to slam shut, and the corridor leading back to her ship was cut off. Zara was trapped. She sprinted toward the exit, but the ship seemed to be shifting, its walls closing in around her. The message in her mind was clear. Something had been awoken, and it was no longer just a part of history. It was alive again, and so was humanity's forgotten fleet. Zara's heart raced as she realized the true gravity of what she had uncovered. The warning wasn't just from the past. It was a message from a future that was now rising, one where the galaxy's greatest threat was humanity's return. But the question that haunted her was, what would she do now? Would she survive long enough to warn the galaxy, or would she become a part of this awakening power, caught in its unstoppable surge? The answers were out of her reach, but one thing was clear: humanity was far from finished. It had only just begun. Zara's breath came in ragged gasps as she ran down the hallway, the rumble of the ship's systems coming to life reverberating in the walls. The sense of urgency was overwhelming. Something ancient had been triggered, and she had no idea what kind of chaos it would bring. The doors had sealed behind her, trapping her in the heart of the ship. Panic surged through her chest, but she forced herself to stay focused. There had to be another way out. As she sprinted down the corridor, the flashing red lights intensified. The ship seemed to be shifting, as if responding to her every movement. The air grew thick with energy, and Zara's head spun as the temperature in the hall rose. She could feel the heat on her skin, an unnatural, almost electrifying sensation. Whatever she had disturbed, it was growing stronger by the second. Her heart pounded in her ears as she turned a corner and found herself in front of a massive door, one that she hadn't noticed before. It was different from the others, more intricate and far larger. Strange symbols adorned its surface, symbols that pulsed faintly in time with the growing energy. Zara's instincts screamed at her to turn back, but she knew she couldn't. The door was the only way forward, and she had no choice but to press on. With trembling hands, she pressed her palm against the cold surface of the door. The symbols shimmered as her touch activated a mechanism hidden within the door. Slowly, the massive entrance began to open, revealing a vast chamber beyond. It was unlike anything Zara had ever seen. The room was enormous, with walls made of a smooth metallic material that shimmered in the dim light. At the center of the room, floating within a web of energy, was the source of the ship's power, the artifact. The machine was more magnificent than she could have imagined. It was colossal, a blend of intricate alien design and advanced human technology. It hovered in the center of the room, suspended by an energy field. Its surface seemed to pulse with life, the glowing lines on its exterior radiating a faint, eerie light. The hum that had filled the ship earlier was louder now, vibrating through the very core of her being. She could feel the power of the machine in the air, thick and electric. Zara stepped forward, her eyes locked on the artifact. There was something captivating about it, something almost hypnotic. She had no idea what it was capable of, but it was clear that it had been built to unleash unimaginable power. The question that lingered in her mind was whether humanity had always intended to use it, or if it had been created to be a last resort, a weapon in case of total annihilation. As she moved closer to the artifact, a series of holographic screens flickered to life, floating around the machine. The symbols on the walls began to rearrange, forming a sequence of words that Zara could barely decipher. She squinted at the strange language and felt a surge of recognition. It was an ancient human dialect, one that had been long forgotten. But as the words began to form, they became clear. Rebirth. Awaken the legacy. Prepare for the return of the humans. A shiver ran down Zara's spine. She had suspected it, but now she knew for sure. This machine was not just a relic of the past. It was a key to humanity's revival, a weapon capable of reshaping the galaxy. But why had it been hidden away? Why had humanity left such a force dormant for so long? She touched the nearest console, her fingers brushing over its surface. The screen flickered and came to life, displaying more information. As the words appeared, Zara's heart skipped a beat. Project Exodus, The Last Stand, Humanity's Final War. The screen shifted, showing images of what appeared to be the final moments before Earth's destruction. A fleet of human ships, massive and imposing, had gathered in space, their guns trained on an enemy that was too powerful to defeat. But the images that followed were even more shocking. Ships being destroyed, planets consumed, and finally, the great exodus of humanity's last fleet, leaving Earth behind. But not all of humanity had left. Some had stayed behind, tasked with safeguarding the future. The fleet had not just been designed to defend humanity. It had been created to prepare for their return, should the galaxy ever forget the power they once wielded. Zara's mind raced as the implications of this revelation began to settle in. The fleet had not been destroyed in the final battle. It had been hidden away, waiting for the day when humanity would rise again. And now, it seemed that day was fast approaching. The room began to vibrate more intensely, the energy from the machine growing more powerful by the second. Zara stumbled back, her thoughts racing. She had unwittingly triggered the awakening of humanity's greatest weapon, and she had no idea how to control it. The machine was alive now, and it was responding to her presence. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind her, trapping her inside the chamber with the artifact. Panic surged once again, but Zara forced herself to take a deep breath. She had to think. There had to be a way to stop it, to prevent the destruction of everything she knew. The hum of the machine grew louder, now accompanied by a strange, otherworldly voice that echoed in the chamber. It wasn't human, but it sounded familiar, like a voice from the past, one that she couldn't quite place. The words it spoke were unintelligible, but Zara felt their weight, their urgency. The machine was calling out to something, to someone. Zara's heart pounded in her chest. The message was clear. She had awoken something ancient, something that could reshape the entire galaxy. Humanity's legacy was not lost, and neither was its power. The question now was whether humanity would rise again to reclaim its place in the stars, or if it would be consumed by the very power it had once wielded. As she stood frozen in the chamber, the ship's energy continued to surge, and the mysterious voice grew louder. The warning had come from Earth's past, but now it was a reality. Humanity's fate, and the fate of the galaxy, was about to be decided. And Zara was at the center of it all. The vibration in the room intensified, and Zara could feel the power of the artifact coursing through the air, charging the very atmosphere around her. She instinctively took a step back, but her feet felt heavy, like the ground beneath her had become solidified. The strange voice from the machine grew louder, more forceful. It was as if the artifact itself was trying to communicate with her, commanding, urging her to do something, anything. Zara's mind raced as she tried to process the chaos unfolding before her. The holographic screens in the room flickered again, displaying new data. She scanned them quickly, her eyes widening as she saw the words forming before her. Initiating process. Rebirth. A cold shiver ran down her spine. The rebirth. This wasn't just a machine. It was a catalyst for something far greater. Something had been triggered, and Zara realized with a sinking heart that she might have unleashed something beyond her control. She reached for the control panel in a desperate attempt to reverse the process. Her hands were shaking, but she had no choice. She had to stop it, no matter what the cost. But as her fingers brushed the cold surface of the console, a sudden surge of energy coursed through her body. The ship's lights flickered as the walls seemed to pulse with life. She gasped as she was forced to her knees by the raw force emanating from the machine. The voice now spoke in a language she could understand, its words echoing through her mind. The time has come. Humanity's return is inevitable. All will witness your power. Zara felt her heart skip a beat. The machine was speaking directly to her now, as though it was attuned to her very essence. The last remnants of humanity's power were awakening. The fleet, buried and hidden for thousands of years, was now beginning to stir in response to the artifact's call. But what did this mean for her? For the galaxy? She struggled to her feet, the pulsing energy seeming to draw her closer to the artifact. It was as if she had become the center of a cosmic storm, every fiber of her being resonated with the raw energy of the ship. The humming sound grew louder, vibrating through her chest. The walls began to crack, and the very air in the room seemed to burn with intensity. With no choice but to continue forward, Zara pushed through the energy field and reached the console. She tapped at the surface again, her vision blurred by the increasing brightness of the machine. Her breath was shallow, and every instinct screamed at her to run, to get as far away as possible. But she knew that wouldn't stop the inevitable. The process was already in motion, and there was no way to undo it. Then the voice returned, softer this time, but still commanding. "You are the key. Humanity's future rests in your hands." As the words resonated within her, Zara's mind flashed back to her childhood, to the stories her grandmother had told her about Earth's fall, about how humanity's ancestors had created a last-ditch weapon to preserve their legacy. She had heard whispers of ancient technology, of fleets that could level entire star systems in seconds. She had never believed those stories. But now, standing in the heart of this forgotten warship, she realized that they had been true all along. A deep rumble filled the chamber, and the floor beneath her feet trembled as the massive machine powered up. Its core began to glow brightly, and the energy in the room seemed to concentrate around her. The artifact was drawing everything it could from the ship, charging itself for the monumental task ahead. Outside, in the vast reaches of space, the dormant fleet, humanity's greatest creation, was waking up. Slowly, like a sleeping giant, the ships began to power on. Hidden within asteroid fields, cloaked in the shadows of forgotten space, they had been waiting for this very moment. The signal had been received. Humanity had returned. Zara's mind was filled with a rush of information. The fleet's location, the ship's specifications, the weapons they contained, beyond anything she had ever imagined. This was humanity's final weapon, a fleet built not only for destruction but for rebirth. The fate of the galaxy rested in the hands of this machine, and Zara knew she had just activated it. But with that knowledge came a terrifying realization. The galaxy would never be the same. Those who had forgotten humanity, who had sought to erase its memory, would now pay the price. The fleet was not just a force of vengeance. It was a reckoning. As the room around her pulsed with light, Zara could feel the presence of the ships, her ancestors' last legacy, coalescing into something far greater than she could ever have imagined. The words flashed in her mind once again. Prepare for the return of the humans. Zara stepped back, breathless, as the artifact's energy continued to rise. The ship groaned, its systems humming with an otherworldly power that had not been seen for millennia. The ancient fleet was ready. But now the question was, could humanity control it, or would this power overwhelm them, just as it had nearly done thousands of years ago? In the distance, the first of the warships began to emerge from its hidden dock. Humanity's wrath had been unleashed, and there would be no turning back. The silence of the void was shattered by a distant rumble, deep and thunderous, as if the very stars themselves were trembling. Zara could feel it, a deep vibration running through her bones, reverberating from the ancient warships hidden in the farthest reaches of the galaxy. The fleet had awakened. She watched as the lights in the chamber flickered once again, responding to the power surging through the artifact. It wasn't just the ship she stood on that had powered up. Across the galaxy, the dormant vessels, hidden away for 40,000 years, had finally received the signal. They were stirring from their long slumber. Each ship, built to be a force of destruction beyond comprehension, was now fully operational. The weapons systems hummed to life, targeting systems calibrated, engines roaring with ancient fury. The fleet was ready, And it was about to come for those who had forgotten humanity. Zara's hands gripped the console tighter as the data flooded her screen. A map of the galaxy appeared before her eyes, and a series of blips began to flash, indicating the locations of the ships. Hundreds of them, stretching from one edge of the galaxy to the other. Their movements were synchronized, each one a calculated strike aimed at erasing the threat that humanity had once faced. The first ships began to move, slipping from their hidden docks like shadows, silent and deadly. Outside the chamber, Zara heard the low hum of the engines firing up, the deep growl of ancient technology coming to life after millennia of silence. She could feel it in the air, the tension, the crackling energy that threatened to tear apart everything in its path. The ship beneath her feet seemed to groan in anticipation, the very walls vibrating with the power of the fleet awakening. She knew what had to be done. The time for hesitation had long passed. Zara's fingers flew over the control panel as she issued commands to the fleet. A deep voice, the same one that had spoken through the artifact, echoed in her mind. Humanity's vengeance is inevitable. You are the harbinger of their return. Zara didn't flinch at the words. She had no time to hesitate. The galaxy had thought humanity was gone, that they were weak, that they were forgotten. But now, they would see that humanity was anything but weak. They would see that humanity's will was unbreakable. She sent the order out across the fleet, each ship receiving it like a call to arms. The fleet was vast, and its firepower was unimaginable. These were not just ships. They were weapons of mass destruction, designed to bring entire star systems to their knees. Zara watched as the fleet moved in perfect formation, each ship a part of a larger, unstoppable force. And then it began. The ships that had once been hidden in the dark corners of the galaxy emerged from their cloaks, their engines igniting in a fiery blaze. The distant stars began to shift as these massive vessels moved into position, their sleek forms cutting through space with deadly precision. Every ship was a masterpiece of destruction, built with one goal in mind: to reclaim the galaxy for humanity. Zara's heart raced as the first of the ships locked onto its target. She knew that the galaxy would feel the shockwaves of this power, even from a distance. The weapons of the ships powered up, massive cannons primed to fire, energy blasts charged and ready. The fleet was about to deliver humanity's first message to the galaxy. We are not gone. We are not weak. And you have made a grave mistake. She couldn't help but think of the many who had fallen before her, the countless people who had fought to preserve humanity's legacy. Their sacrifices had not been in vain. The fleet was now their legacy, an unstoppable force of retribution. And Zara was its messenger, its commander, the one who would bring forth humanity's wrath. Suddenly, a bright light filled the room. Zara shielded her eyes from the intense glare, feeling the heat of the energy building in the chamber. The artifact's power surged again, and she realized with a start that the first wave of the fleet was ready to strike. Her command had been received, and now it was time to take action. She sent the final command to fire. The ancient fleet, now fully awakened, unleashed its power. Energy beams shot from the ships, their brilliant light cutting through the darkness of space. The first targets, long-forgotten enemies who had dared to forget humanity, began to burn. The light was blinding, the shockwaves rattling the galaxy. Zara's breath caught in her throat as she watched the destruction unfold. This was humanity's power, awakened after eons of dormancy, and with it, the galaxy would learn a painful lesson: never underestimate humanity. The fleet wasn't just a military force. It was the embodiment of humanity's will to survive, to fight for its place in the galaxy. And now, the galaxy would feel the weight of that will. With every ship that fired its weapons, with every explosion that lit up the dark, Zara knew that the galaxy's fate had already been sealed. Humanity had returned, and nothing would ever be the same again. The stars seemed to tremble as the fleet continued its unstoppable march across the galaxy. The message humanity had waited 40,000 years to send was now being delivered with force and fury. The fleet's power was unmatched, and the galaxy was feeling the full brunt of Earth's vengeance. Every ship, every weapon, and every commander was a testament to humanity's enduring will to survive, to rise from the ashes. Zara stood at the helm, her eyes fixed on the displays in front of her, watching as the fleet tore through space, leaving destruction in its wake. She could feel the power of the ships beneath her feet, each one firing upon their targets with deadly precision. The enemies who had once mocked humanity, who had thought them weak, were now learning the true meaning of fear. The first target, a large alien colony, had been obliterated in a flash of light. The energy blasts from the fleet's cannons had burned through the atmosphere, shattering the surface and leaving nothing but a glowing crater. The destruction was swift, almost merciful in its efficiency. It was a warning to anyone who thought humanity could be defeated. But there was more to this than just revenge. Zara knew that this wasn't just about punishing those who had wronged humanity. It was about sending a message to the entire galaxy. The message that Earth was not gone, that humanity was not weak, and that they would never be forgotten. No longer would they sit in the shadows, cowering in silence. They had been silenced for far too long, but now they had the power to speak with the loudest voice imaginable. As the fleet moved forward, Zara's thoughts turned to the command she had given. It wasn't just about destruction. It was about reclaiming humanity's place in the galaxy. The first wave had been successful, but the fleet wasn't done. There was still so much more to do. There were still more enemies to punish, more messages to send. The ancient warships continued to blast through the stars, leaving a trail of devastation in their wake. Every planet, every star system that had once been a part of the enemy alliance, now trembled in fear. The galaxy was on the brink of understanding just how powerful humanity truly was. Zara's fingers hovered over the console, and for a moment she hesitated. The power of the fleet was beyond anything she had ever imagined. But with that power came responsibility. She knew that humanity was not just about revenge. It was about survival, about ensuring that humanity would never again be pushed into the shadows. And so, Zara made the decision to send the final message. A message not just to the enemies of humanity, but to the entire galaxy. She typed in the command, her eyes narrowing as she watched the transmission being prepared. This would be the final warning, the last plea for understanding, the ultimate declaration of humanity's strength. With a deep breath, she pressed the button. The fleet's communication systems flared to life as the message was sent. It spread across the galaxy like wildfire, reaching every corner of space, every race, every civilization that had ever thought to underestimate humanity. The message was simple, yet powerful. It was the final declaration of humanity's return, and it would echo through the galaxy for centuries to come. We are humanity. We have returned, and you will fear us. Zara watched as the transmission completed, her heart racing. The fleet continued its assault, but now it was more than just a show of power. It was a statement, a promise. The galaxy would never forget humanity again. As the final blasts of energy lit up the dark expanse of space, Zara allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The galaxy had been warned, and the galaxy would remember. The fleet had delivered the message. Humanity had reclaimed its place in the stars. And now, the universe would tremble at the name of Earth.